Hi, my name is Steve Faulkner. Welcome to Real Magic Review and my interview with Richard Young. I was so looking forward to this because I've followed Richard's podcast and his incredible journey, which I won't go into. I won't ruin it for you, but it was just such a lovely story. So I really hope you enjoy this as much as I did. I found this really inspirational as well. So make sure you watch it till the end. This is a real corker, and I'm in such a good mood because at the end of it, I thought it hadn't recorded, and he was like, "No, it was lovely." He'll go, "No, we'll do it again." And I was just like, "We can't because I can't get that gold again." It was spontaneous. The stories were great, but then I realised I had recorded it, so I'm just in a beaming mood. I don't have to do it all again and try and recreate that. But I loved it, so enjoy it. Any questions, any comments? Please obviously like, subscribe, share, and of course visit cardmagiccourse.com. That's the machine that runs this whole thing and makes it possible. So great way to support the channel and to support your learning is cardmagiccourse.com. Learn from a pro. So have fun, enjoy, and take care. There he is.
There he is.
There he is. I've got it on speaker view. I'm paranoid about not recording and not being in the right view.
I see. Wow, your camera's amazing.
It's all right, isn't it?
Yeah, really good.
It's I've got a webcam, but this is kind of what I set up for posh. You're posh. You're a posh guest.
Right, am I really? That's good.
Yeah. yeah, totally. So how are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Yeah, it's weird times, isn't it? Very strange. Everyone having to find new ways to make money and all the rest of it, and I'm exactly the same. So yeah, it's just trying to cope like everybody else. So there are people with much bigger problems than me. One of those kind of things. How about yourself?
Yeah, I know it's a strange one, isn't it? And we'll get on to kind of, I mean, all these have been starting in the same way because I think we have to, it's kind of there, isn't it? It's right there for all of us as performers. And I think it is important to talk about it, but how we are as well, not just the work side of it, because obviously that affects how we are. But yeah, I'm all right. I think it's just having projects, having something to do, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I can't bear the thought of, I've had some people you can tell on social media how much time some people have got on their hands. You know,
oh, absolutely, yeah, you can tell. And like you said, everyone's looking for a new project, aren't they, to do? And, you started this obviously before any of this happened. I bet you're pleased you've got it, aren't you?
I am. It's a strange one because it did start. And of course, you've got it's that double-edged sword of being really glad I had this. But obviously, all of a sudden, everybody's got a podcast, everybody's online, which I think is a really healthy thing. But you've just got to work a bit harder.
Yeah, I think a bit of competition's good, and I think when you were kind of like one of the first to do it, then you're already way ahead of the game, sort of thing. I certainly with my podcast found that there's lots of podcasts that came and went while I was making mine. It's really hard to keep making them, particularly because there's so much content out there. You don't get a lot of feedback in the early days, and you're putting your heart and soul into it, and it's just kind of going out there, and you're kind of seeing the views are going up, but you're not hearing from anybody. And so I think a lot of people don't stick with it, but it's really worth it. There are people out there, and it providing it's good what you're doing, it will just naturally grow, won't it, into a bigger flower kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's funny when you said looking at the views go up. You mean obsessively looking for the views going up in the early days?
It's like back in the day, wasn't it, when we were all close-up magicians 10 plus years ago? We were constantly looking at our SEO, and now we're all looking at views and things like that. So it's just switched. It's just moved across to something else.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to talk about the podcast and stuff. But talking about projects, because I want to get this out of the way. I said I'd get it out of the way as if it's a bad thing. I mean, just. Because we reconnected over your project, which is this, and I just think it's great. I've been playing with this, and this is the changing card. Yeah. How good is that?
They're fun, aren't they? They're really great fun to play with. I've had a great time making them and playing around with them, and I'm still they're really difficult to make, and each one takes I've got it to just under an hour now to make each one. So financially, it's not the smartest thing I've ever done, but I really like it, and I've been tweaking them. In fact, you've got one of the first ones, and and I've sort of improved them again over the last sort of few weeks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just sort of things that, just making them a bit smoother and a bit faster and a bit quieter and all those kind of things. So yeah, they're really great fun. Do you know the story of it, the background of them? I don't know if I told you.
No, I was going to ask you because, well, I was interested because of which we'll go into after this, but because of it's always interesting. I mean, is this your first release? Is this your first?
It is, yeah, it's the first thing I've released. Yeah, I've had a few different things, a few different ideas, and they've never made it to the point where they were released for various reasons, either time or them not being, financially viable from a dealer's point of view. So this is the first thing I've released with my own name on, sort of thing.
Yeah, and you just so people know, this is the changing card. It's Bob Swaddling, isn't it? Changing card.
When I was a kid, I met Bob Swaddling, and he mentored me for 2 or 3 years. He's an amazing, generous man, really is. I owe him more than I can ever repay. He used to come to my house every 2 or 3 weeks, and he'd sit with me for hours. He never charged me a penny. And yeah, obviously, if you're old enough to know, Bob was a dealer back in the day and had loads of really interesting products using all sorts of crazy technology at the time, like motors and magnets, and he made beautiful gimmick coins. But the product of his that I always loved the most was the changing card. And they stopped being available like nearly 2 decades ago because Bob retired and him and his wife Val moved to Florida. He'd still make them for me. As and when I'd see them, I would do them at close-up gigs and things. And every now and again, I'm in the double act with Young and Strange. We do a little TV spot, and normally they'd want a little 10-minute teaser to say you're coming up in the next after the commercial break. And it was always our go-to trick to do a quick changing card thing. And so I said to him a little while ago, look, I'd love to, bring them back and keep them going and all that kind of thing, and make sure your name's attached to them, because as you know, with magic tricks, they get ripped off left, right, and centre. And Bob is the originator of this kind of effect. And in my opinion, I'm biased, obviously, but I think it's still the best. It's not, as you've seen, Steve, it's not going to break. It's very versatile. You can do all different effects with it. You can view it fairly close up. There's no elastic thread or sliding panels on it or anything like that. And so we talked about it, but, as life is, we got busy with other things. And then when this all came about, I sort of said, now's probably a great time to do it. So we spent a lot of time over the last few months him teaching me how to make them over FaceTime with his wife. Okay. And, as is always the case with Bob, even when I was a kid, he was, he's hard on me. And he was like, that's not good enough. You've done this wrong, and go back and do it again. And that's why now I think we've ended up, hopefully you agree, we've ended up with a really great product that's fun and versatile and durable as well. It's going to last.
Yeah, I think that's really, I was talking about this morning on one of my little video things, that the importance of people being honestly hard with you in that way of, because we get so many people, don't we, in magic saying, oh yeah, it's great, oh, it's great. And what we really need is someone say, yeah, it's great, but we need to do that and that and that to get. And I think with products, being a reviewer, and of course now a broadcast journalist, that is an in-joke, by the way, yes. For those of you, I'm not being arrogant, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I think that there is so much coming out now, and it's very easy to release a product. And in lockdown, what I found is that people are kind of farming stuff out. So the reason it's important to me, I think, to talk about this so off the bat was because there is a lot of stuff coming out that you kind of go, this has been rushed out, or they're waiting for at the end of lockdown to get the proper stuff out, some people, so they're kind of putting the bits and pieces out because they know we can't perform a lot. And I really want people to know, and I'm not affiliated, there's no cut in this, that this isn't that. This isn't you going, Yeah, this isn't me, this is, obviously, listen, of course, hopefully I'll make money with you. I don't mind telling your viewers, at the minute they've been out for weeks. I haven't made a penny. I've pumped a lot of money in to get this project off the ground, and we haven't even broken even yet. So it's not gonna. I'm not gonna retire from this. It's not. And one of the reasons is like I can't go and do a deal with Murphy's or something, because although they might want them and they take an interest, the percentage deal that they offer as a wholesaler
it's not worthwhile. They take too long to make. So this is always going to be a thing that I'm going to be doing myself. Every changing card, I've handmade it. There's no production line. There's no 5 people helping me. From beginning to end, it's me. So yeah, I'm never going to be able to retire on it. But yeah, it's not been rushed out because of this. It's something we did talk about a long time ago. And as you know, this is a proven product. It was out 30 years ago. And I've had some lovely messages actually from some of the marketing we've done for it. We've gone back to kind of old school marketing, put printed adverts in magazines, because some of the older members, they don't look at Instagram or Facebook, but they remember them. So we've put adverts in Magic Scene and the Magic Circular and things like that, so that some of the older members go, oh, I remember these. And we've had some lovely messages. People going, I used to buy these 30 years ago, and great to see them back. So yeah, I appreciate your kind words on that though. Yeah, it's not been rushed out like a lot of stuff is.
Absolutely, and it's got a nostalgia to it. I can imagine the copy, because we all remember reading that ad copy of going, you throw a card in the air, it changes in midair, and you'd kind of read that in the past and go, yeah, right. when I get it, it's going to change in my hand. But it's kind of made for that, isn't it? And I think it's made for showing on a screen as well. The first time I saw this, I saw Rob James do it.
Yes.
And you don't see Rob James do much on social media. It's not going to be. And then when he did it, I went, hang on a minute. And I didn't know anything about you releasing them. It was Rob James did a thing, and I went, oh, that's great. And then obviously the release came second.
Well, the best thing, I've got great friends, and Rob, one of the first ones I made, I sent to Rob, and Rob came up with this hand-to-hand throw.
Yeah.
So Bob's version 30 years ago was always you just tossed it in the air and it did its work in the air and you caught it. And so Rob came up with this brilliant, just throwing it from hand to hand. And as you mentioned, 30 years ago, when Bob invented these, there wasn't Instagram or Facebook or magicians online. This is actually a brand new thing for those type of magicians. It's also a socially distant trick, because guess what? They can't touch them.
They don't want to be looking.
That's one of the flaws. That of course they can't be examined or touched. So it's a trick you do from you can do it close up, but you can't hand them out. No. So there's loads of lovely things with it that kind of tick boxes for the current world we're living in with regards to social media and social distancing. While we're on the subject of friends, I mean, a huge part of this project, Bring This Back, has been Harry de Cruz.
Yeah.
Harry's in the trailer. He also does the instructions with me, and I sent cards to him, and also Simon Lipkin came up with some great ideas for them. But Harry, I can say this, and I think I'm qualified to say, because I've been in magic a long time. I really honestly believe 25 years from now, Harry will be like the Andy Nyman of this generation. He is so creative. He had so many ideas. Bob was stunned that, this thing that he'd worked on for 25 years, 30 years, that this young kid had come along, with the greatest respect to him, and had came up with a load of new effects, handling, ideas for it. And so Harry's been amazing. And, I'd urge anyone, if you're a magician out there and you've got a TV show or you're doing something really creative, go to Harry, because I've known him a long, long time, but this is the first time I've worked with him on something. A number of the products on the website, you'll see have got Harry's name attached to them. Harry came up, I'll show you it actually. Harry came up with this has been one of our most popular ones. This is the Ace and Queen Transpo. I'm not sure if you've seen this. So it's a 2-card effect, basically Ace and Queen. You ask spectators to hold up their hands. They get the Queen in their hand. The Ace changes into the Queen. And then, of course, they're left with the Ace in their hand. Of course, this can be examined. It's a normal card. That was Harry.
That's great.
And yeah, so he's amazing. Yeah, I don't know if you know how well you know him, but he's going to be a
well. My only. I mean, I know him now, but it was lovely a couple of years ago. Actually, more than a couple of years ago. Probably about 4 or 5 years ago when Dynamo was touring. Was that about 4 years ago? He came to Sheffield and he sorted me out a ticket for me and my kids and to go backstage and see Steve. And he didn't have to do that. He didn't know me that well. And I thought that was a really, really lovely thing to do, and a moment that we'll always remember. And it was just before my daughter became kind of a proper teenager. So she's really kind of starstruck, and it was a really lovely moment. And again, there was no real motivation for him to do that other than just to be cool. So.
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons, Harry would say this himself, one of the reasons Harry is so creative is that he was in that Dynamo machine for 5 or 6 years, however long he worked there, and was, they were bringing in all the best guys. Of course, Dynamo and Dan are machines themselves, creating things and coming up with things. So Harry was immersed in it for years, and so he's got that brain now that thinks in that way that so few magicians do, right? E.g. in a creative and original way.
Yeah, and that must be, I was thinking of this with you, and that's why when you released this, I kind of looked at a double take at it, because you've just by, I mean, you've got your, which we'll talk about in a minute, you Young and Strange, so you've got the experience of performing, but then you've got the I can't even begin to imagine the experience you gained from doing the podcast, just by osmosis, by talking to those people, which we'll discuss. So again, for me, when you talk to the more and more professional magicians you talk about, that knowledge kind of seeps in, and you can make judgments based on a more expert judgment, really, because of what you've learned from them, and you don't have to agree with any of it. But again, I don't just want to, because I will do a review of the cards. I mean, I kind of have really, but I'll do another little one. But yeah, I mean, I think that knowledge is there. And talking about your experience before the podcast, and if people don't know, and if you haven't listened to it, you really must. The Magician's podcast, Richard's podcast, it was phenomenal. But we'll get onto that. But with Young and Strange, your first, obviously you did shows in close up and things like that, but that was your first show that you put together, your big sort of illusion show, or did you do anything on your own?
So, yeah, my story, as quickly and briefly, is obviously as a kid I got into close up magic. I was taught by Bob. I then lost interest in magic for a few years, and then got back into it. And the thing that I always loved, what I really, really loved in magic when I was a kid was David Copperfield and his illusions and all of his iconic pieces that, we're all familiar with. And so I always wanted to be an illusionist, but especially in this country, there's no opportunities for it. And I just had sort of like, honestly, I think I was a bit stupid, really. I bought an origami illusion from Los Angeles for like $5,000, and I still live with my parents. And I used to keep it under my bed. And I remember my mum and dad going, you should probably spend your money on a car or something. And I just loved them. And it was all really because of Copperfield. And obviously a few other illusionists as well that I love, like Hans Klock, and I saw Lance Burton in Vegas. And so when I met Strange and I met because the story we tell...
It's Sam Strange.
Sam Strange, yeah. So the story we tell the public is that we met when we were kids, and it's not true. We say that story because it's what people want to hear, actually. Yeah. When we used to tell the public the real story, they were kind of disappointed. The real story is we met when we were in our early 20s, and the reason is we're both from Oxford, and we both were close-up magicians. And I kept hearing his name, he kept hearing mine. People were playing us off each other, prices and stuff. So we met, and Strange had actually got into magic when he was about 18. So he was fairly new to it, albeit he was a brilliant close-up magician in his own right by then. And so he loved card manipulation as well. He'd learned that as like a hobby. And so I always wanted to like do an illusion show and put on a show. Of course, I didn't have the material, but I had two mates, Strange and another guy called Jimmy. He's not a professional magician anymore. And we booked a little theatre in Oxford, 100-seater, and we filled it with friends and family, and we put on a show. And we did an illusion at the end, a metamorphosis thing that we'd nicked off Paul Daniels. And I remember we did it on Penn and Teller Fool us years later, and he called me and shouted at me.
Oh, really?
And he was quite right too. I was new to it, green, and didn't realise, like, it's all fine kind of nicking someone's idea when you're young and doing it for your friends and family, but when you do it on national television, that's a completely different thing. And he called me and he gave me excuse my French, gave me a bollocking, and quite right too. It was a valuable lesson that I learned in the very early days. And so it just went from there. We did Fool Us. We were very lucky to get onto Penn and Teller Fool Us on the first series. From there, we went and did Edinburgh festivals and things. And it just evolved from there, really, into, it's my biggest love, my biggest passion is standing on stage with Strange and having fun and doing big spectacular illusions. And obviously it's gone to a point now, somewhere we could never have dreamed of, actually, which was in 2012, we met a guy called Alex Jarrett, and he's a producer, and he created a show called Champions of Magic, which is an ensemble magic show similar to like The Illusionists and Impossible that was in the West End and things. And Alex gave us a gig, and we thought it was going to be 2 nights. Well, 7 years later, we're still in the show, and the show moved across to America 3 years ago. And so we've toured all over America with this show, playing huge theatres, theatres that honestly we have no business playing, you know, but you know, it's an ensemble show, so it works. You know, people buy tickets, and we've played rooms that Copperfield played back in the 90s and stuff. So for me, as a kid who just loved illusions, to know that it would go there one day is beyond my wildest dreams. I've had the greatest experiences of my life on tour with Champions of Magic. And also, because we started earning some money from it, you know, we've been able now, I really hope the show comes back to England at some point, because we've really come up with some interesting stuff. And we've got some really, really big illusions now that, you know, are original and interesting. And also, critically, Steve, they've been worked over the last few years. You know, we've been lucky. You know, a couple of Christmases ago, we were in Toronto for Christmas. We did 42 shows in 17 days, you know, and so we were just able to just hammer it out, work on it and make it better and check the script. And Alex is very much part of the producer of the show. He's very much part of the creative process for me and Strange. We work brilliantly as a three. And so, yeah, it's just been the greatest thrill of my life, really. Sorry if that was a long ramble, but that's
no, it wasn't a ramble at all, and it's exactly what I want to hear. And I think I've always been quite jealous, really, of that thing of I did a double act, and I know they come with their challenges. I know, because I did a double act with one of my very closest friends for a while in the street, and I love him to bits. I still love him, but it was just hard because we're two different people in the end, and it is like a marriage, as you know. You are totally, you know, you're there, and you've got to find ways of kind of existing on your own as well as together. And I think it must, I don't know, I mean, what's it like for you now? Because of you, it must be amazing to work with someone and have someone else there, whether it's the people in the cast or Sam, because it can be a very lonely existence. You go into all these lovely places, you can't really enjoy them on your own because you kind of doing the thing.
Strange won't mind me saying this, you know, we've been working together now for over 10 years, and it's had its huge challenges. We get on really, really well, but obviously it's like a marriage, you know. We're also in two very different places in our personal lives. So I'm a single guy, Strange is married with a kid. And so, you know, when we're away and we'll go and tour over there for, you know, 6 or 7 weeks sometimes longer, he's away from home. You know, he has his own challenges. You know, I get sad when I come home. He gets sad sometimes when he's out there. So there's all that. I'd give someone a brilliant, here's a thing I wish I'd known. And I know, again, Strange won't mind me saying this. One of the things I realised on reflection, if I was to go back in time, if you're going to go into business with someone in a double act, or actually in any type of business, go into business with someone who has very different skill sets to your own. Yeah. You will enrich each other's lives, and also you will enrich the business that you're in. That's something actually Strange and I have struggled with. We have very similar skill sets. As you heard a few minutes ago, we're both close-up magicians working in Oxford. And so actually there's huge things that I wish between us we could do that we can't do. And then also, because we're both the same in so many ways, you know, those tiny differences sometimes create, you know, conflict between us. I mean, he's a great guy. He's very reasonable. And we always, you know, we'll find a solution. But yeah, I think actually he would agree, you know, I think he'd love it if I could weld, or, you know, if I could sew or something, and he could do the magic, and vice versa. But, you know, so that's something to bear in mind if you do ever consider going into a double act. And there's so many great double acts out there: Penn and Teller, Barry and Stuart, Morgan and West, Carl and Dave. These guys, you know, they're all great in their own way. I'd love to know if they agree actually about, you know, it'd be better if actually you were good at that and I was good at that, rather than us both being good at the same thing. It's quite interesting.
No, it's really interesting, and I think it's the same in a relationship as well. I think that you have to have the same values or similar values. You have to see the world in a similar way. But you know, if you have a relationship and you are both slightly anxious, or you're both sort of drama queens, or you're both, it can be a really, I'm talking from experience, you know, that you need someone that's similar to you. But like I said, like you said, if the similarities are too, then you're just always going to feed off each other in good and bad ways. So I think you're absolutely right. You
know, the podcasts that I made, you know, I started off making them, you know, and I interviewed my mates really at the beginning. And then as the years went on, you know, I remember we landed Dynamo and then Darren, and then it sort of, you know, kept going from there. Bigger and bigger names were happy to take part with it. And, you know, as I met these greats, you know, the Tellers, the Copperfields, the Hans Clocks, the Ehrlich brothers, these guys, you know, they've got one thing in common, all of the greats, their work ethic.
Yeah.
They work so hard. You know, they get up early in the morning and they work till very late at night, and they are totally focused on themselves and their own work. You know, none of them are accidents. They're really not. They all have a relentless, you know, passion for what they're doing, and a will to get better and to become more, you know, whether it's more famous, richer, whatever it is their driving force, and that's their own personal business. But they've all got that in common. When I met them all, was that, you know, they all just work incredibly hard. And I think, you know, I spent 10 years working as a close-up magician, and there were some weeks I'd wake up on a Monday morning and I'd know my next gig was on Saturday night, and bloody hard to
it's not a good place to be. It sounds great at the beginning, doesn't it?
It does, but it's really not good. And, you know, it's not good in so many ways, like in terms of your own creativity, your own career prospects, and your own mental health. Like, you know, it comes with massive challenges. These guys that I've met that are great, I'm not sure they're all happy, if I'm being honest. Some of them are so driven to get, you know, some of them I've met and gone, I'm not sure they're happy people, but mentally they're all stable in a way, in terms of going that they've got, because they're working towards something, they, you know, everything else kind of falls into place reasonably well. Whereas a lot of close-up magicians who, like I've talked about, who, you know, have 2 or 3 gigs a week and convince themselves they're busy. You're not busy, fellas. I know, because I've been there. You know, it's very easy. The day can disappear when you get up and you take the kids to school and you walk the dog and you do a couple of emails, you make some lunch. That's not busy. That's just, you fill in the time with something. So yeah, it's kind of been, that was kind of the most interesting thing really from making all the podcasts over the years, was just, yeah, seeing these guys and just, you know, how hard they work. That was the thing that I, you know, has really I've tried to connect that with what I do now, whether it's a changing card project or Young and Strange or whatever it is, making podcasts. You know, I try really now to apply myself to it in a kind of intense way, I guess, if I'm being honest, you know, a fairly obsessive way. And I think some of the work I've done over the last few years has been good because of that.
Yeah, I think so. And just as a kind of, for those who don't know, and I don't think there'll be many people who don't, but for new listeners, that you you obviously the Young Strange is always going on in the background of the podcast. You started this podcast, we'll talk about when in a minute, and it started, you know, I remember listening from the early days, and then, as you say, became bigger and bigger and bigger. It became and for me it was, I realized that, I mean, I listened to every single one of them, and that's,
oh wow, did you?
Saying, I mean, just obsessively, and re-listen to a lot of them. And what I found exactly that. I mean, one of my questions was going to be, what was your big learning from all of it, which you've just answered, which is great. But I think I came away not just for the magic, but having that, learning that from, you know, you've got this work ethic that everybody had, this passion, and that is really, that's where the inspiration comes for me. It's kind of going, hey, it's like that that Seinfeld thing. He said one day he kind of woke up and, you know, he was doing the thing of a couple of emails, coffee, you know, maybe a little complaining that he had to do a bit of writing, and he saw a load of builders walking to work, and he kind of went, they're going to work in the morning till the evening, and that's what I should do. And that's when he started this. He had a calendar. Do you know about the cross thing on the calendar he had?
I don't know about this, actually. No.
He had he had a calendar on the wall, and he used to put an X if he'd written enough that day. And on the next day, if he wrote enough, he'd put another X. And the point was that he couldn't break the chain. So after a while, you've got this chain of X's, and if you don't have a day's writing, you have to break the chain. So, and it's really what I've done it before with things like not drinking and things like that. You kind of don't, after about 10, you don't want to break the chain, because it becomes this kind of visual thing. But that idea of we've got a job to do here, and if we can achieve, you know, if we can get good enough to go and do close-up gigs, which isn't an easy thing to do, we kind of belittle it a little bit because we all do it and we all get tired of doing it, arguably, some of us, but you forget how much work it takes to get to a level where you can go out and relax in front of an audience and do that. And if we can achieve that in, you know, faffing around for an hour a day with a deck of cards or whatever, what can we achieve when we do 6 or 7 hours of stuff that we love?
I don't think that a lot of close-up magicians are lazy people. I just think they just don't know what to do with themselves. That's the thing, you know. And that was certainly the case for me for years. I didn't, before I met Strange and before I had the podcast, I just didn't know what to do with the spare time. So it would just evaporate into, a lack of productivity, basically. But I think we're all that's what we're all looking for, aren't we? Is sort of something, especially at the minute with everything that's going on. I mean, I certainly would never have known about doing a close-up job again after all of this.
I bet you will.
I was saying to Alex for Champions of Magic, I one of the things I don't really like is we're not forced, but we do this meet and greet thing after the show in the lobby, where we meet the audience, and it's very sweet. We meet the kids, have a little photo. Yeah. But I've done a lot. I've done like 400 of them, and they just drive me crazy now.
Yeah, of course.
The same conversation every time. It's people constantly going, "You're not very tall, actually, are you, in real life?" And all this kind of stuff. "Oh, you look slimmer on stage." "Oh, thanks." Yeah. I said
classic
to Alex,
smile.
Yeah, I said to Alex the other day, I said, "I'll never moan about meet and greet again because of this." But I just think that we're all just looking to apply ourselves to something. And the thing I would urge magicians to do is the podcast. I never monetized it. I never made a penny from it, really. There was this amazing GoFundMe thing at the end that was organised, and I worked it out actually afterwards. It kind of meant the previous 2 years hadn't really cost me any money. Yeah. So it was a passion project, and I loved it. But I would urge you guys just to do something that has no monetary value. You'll have a great time. You'll reconnect with why you love magic and why you fell in love with it. And I've recently written some articles. I wrote an art. I've got it here. I'll show it to you.
Yeah, we're going to get
for the Magic Circus. This is the Magic Circles magazine, and we wrote a really long article. It's going to run over 2 issues, all about 5 of his iconic illusions. And so this took me like 2 months. Didn't make a penny from this. I had the best time. I chatted to my hero on the phone for like 30, 40 hours over 2 months. And I rewatched all his work again because we were talking about it. And, so just do something to, reinvigorate your love in magic. If it's become your business, if it's become your profession, then mostly probably you're thinking about how to make money with it all the time. Do something that isn't about making money. It's just about the love of it. It's really, really beneficial, and you'll get lots of benefits from it in different ways.
I completely agree. And that's actually what started all this for me. It was, I'd fallen out of love with magic, which I call my wilderness years, which I'll talk about. And I wanted to reconnect, as I did what I was basically, long story short, I was in a hospital in Bulgaria and got a couple of lovely messages from Mike Vincent and Rich McDougall saying, "Why don't you get back into magic?" And I had this Darryl book on me, and I've forgotten what it was like to just learn something for the sake of learning it, to just learn. And I thought, I want to keep that going. So anyway, the review channel came out of kind of wanting to be accountable, really, and make me stay into it for the joy of it. So reviewing products is a way of me just looking at different magic things and playing and all that. And of course this, I'll be the first to say it's not a moneymaker. Yes, some people sign up for the course, but not many. People always think everything's a moneymaker, don't they? And you go, no, but it almost, yes, a byproduct would be nice if it did, but that's not the driving force of it. And your podcast was, it was so blatantly obvious. And I think that was why it was a winner. I think with some podcasts and projects, you watch them and you can feel the underlying agenda. You can feel that it's a marketing thing, or it's something to create awareness for you, or this and it. And I think that journey from, and for those who don't know, you started off, like you said, interviewing your mates. You finished off interviewing your hero, Copperfield. And it was like watching someone walking down the yellow brick road looking for the Wizard of Oz and not knowing whether they were going to find it or not. Yeah. And it was a story arc. It was like, we all kind of, I remember thinking, even before it was mentioned, I remember thinking, I can imagine this going somewhere. Because the names were getting bigger and bigger. And you always talked about Copperfield during it. You always, you talked about it with your guests. You talked about it with Alan Hudson, who was always on there. And I think there was a subconscious urging of it to go somewhere. And when it did, and a long story short, and you can talk about this, when it's like you're going to interview Copperfield at the end, it was almost like it, and I know it wasn't, but it was always like it was a film that was written. It was, you were someone that was going to be interviewing this person that had started it all for you. So the journey couldn't have been more perfect. And the thing, and I'm not just saying this to blow smoke up your ass, but the thing that was very apparent with your joy of the journey, and you were a human doing a journey. You weren't a cocky magician going, I'm going to interview the people. You were a person that was exploring this. And I wanted to ask about what kept you going, because for me, I get nervous every time I do something like this. I get nervous that I'm not going to ask the right questions. I mean, all those natural things. Every time I do a review, am I going to just be talking crap? Am I going to, and that's, I think, for all of us, every time we do a show, there's always that little underlying thing. We want it to be a good one. And when you went from interviewing your friends to when those names getting bigger, did you have any of that? Did you have that kind of insecurity, or was it just a natural?
No, I did, absolutely. One of the things that really made me, it kind of made the podcast good, but also allowed me to relax. So I was very diligent in my preparation. So, I really would do a large amount of research. And there were some people that I interviewed over these, and I won't name names, who I didn't really know their work very well. I knew they were people who definitely deserved their place on the podcast, but, I didn't know their work. So I'd always make sure that I knew their work, knew their story as much as you can find out online or something like that. But, that side to it, it did make me nervous. One of the things I just want to touch on there, something you said as well, was about what I got from it. I don't mind sharing this with you, actually. And it's not me being smart. It was stuff that came that I could never have imagined. So, for example, about 2 or 3 years in, Matt Edmondson, I don't know if you know Matt Edmondson, he Radio 1 DJ. Matt was a member of the Young Magicians Club. Matt has a big production company. He was creating a magic TV show pilot. It was an interesting character-based magic show that was going to be pitched to BBC One. And he needed a magician for it. And he was looking all around the place for the person who looked like and sounded like and felt like the character that he had in his mind. And he was listening to my podcast, and it made him go, oh, maybe Richard. And then he sort of looked me up, saw what I looked like. And next thing, I got cast for this thing. It never got picked up by the BBC, as I think 1 in 100 TV shows does get picked up.
Yeah, of course.
Gets pitched. But I had this amazing experience with that. Went on for a year or so where, I was, Richard McDougall, who you mentioned, actually came in, and I got to work with him. He turned me into this character that Matt had visualized. And so I did that. I hired illusions out to people that had listened to the podcast. The most interesting one was the Ehrlich brothers. So if you don't know these guys, they're two brilliant illusionists. They're based in Germany. They're absolute mega stars in Germany. They play football stadiums. They've got an enormous fan base. And they do incredibly contemporary illusion work. I absolutely loved the look of their work. And Rob James and I and Strange, a few years ago, we went to Germany to see their show. We sat there, didn't understand the word. The whole thing was in German. Of course, we could appreciate the visuals and absolutely loved it. And so when they announced that they were coming to do a show at Wembley Arena last year, I reached out to them through their management, said, could I interview them? Went and interviewed them in London when they came over and did some PR. And little did I know, they'd hired somebody, who I won't name, who was helping them bring their show to England and turn their humour and their words into English. And they weren't getting on very well with this guy. They didn't feel he got them. And so next thing, I interviewed them for my podcast for an hour, and that's it. I say goodbye. A few hours later, I get a call from the manager saying, actually, they're going to fire this guy. Do you want to help? They like Brilliant. You, and they think you get them, and obviously their work, and you've been to see the show in Germany, and so that all came because of the podcast. It's now transpired. I've worked with them on quite a number of things. I flew to Germany a couple of months ago to help them with their. They're bringing out a kids' magic set. It's going to be brought out here in England next year. They've got a deal with a major toy distributor. And so I went over and helped them with that, and I'm going to help them when they come back and do Wembley next September. It was meant to have already happened, but I'm helping them again with their script. These are all things that came just from, as you said initially, just going and interviewing my mates with a microphone. Yeah. I could never have dreamed that it would lead to working with all these amazing people. I certainly never would have got these opportunities if I'd have just been doing close-up gigs, which I'd done for the previous number of years. Putting myself out there and out of my comfort zone, as you talk about, actually opened a lot of doors.
Yeah, And again, it just goes back to that thing. And a big learning for me, because I did the whole thing of when I moved up to Sheffield from being a street performer, became a close-up magician, and I didn't know the first thing about anything, about marketing or anything. And the marketing stuff, and I learned it all, and I did all the thing, and it got the email list and all that, and it kind of worked a bit, but I realized I had to go back a step and just create the thing I was, it's great to say, learning how to say you're brilliant, but you've got to have something to back it up. And I think that to then refocus on the work, and of course, yes, you've got to do your marketing and stuff, but you have to really, and I think magicians sometimes do get this wrong. You see on social media, they've got this great marketing, but you don't ever see what is they're actually kind of selling. And I think that if you concentrate, it's like bands. Bands become good bands because they love playing music. They don't become good bands because they've strategically written a couple of songs with those beats that they've researched work well in that situation. I mean, arguably that does happen with kind of more manufactured bands, but I think you're right. You just do the work, and if you really love it, the first thing you can do is you're kind of happy to put that work in that you talk about because you love it, because it's something that is values driven, and good things tend to come if it's in line with what you genuinely want to do. I think if you're happy to do that work, and it's a great example of that. I want to know. I just got one of the things that I was thinking about always when I was listening to you was what I wanted to imagine what that was like, kind of walking up to Copperfield. I'm sure you had this a little bit earlier with other people like Chris Kenny. You must have had the same kind of nerves. But what was it like that day you turned up? And what was the process actually from you finding out you were going to do it to kind of getting there and walking in? I want to know what that felt like, but what it looked like, and that whole thing.
It was a proper adventure. So I made a trip to Vegas, and he hadn't agreed to do it. Okay. I just decided to take a punt on it and go, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to try and live the American dream and somehow get him to do this interview. And so I had Nathan Burton, Teller, Homer Luwag, and Chris Kenner, who are David's two, they've been with him for 25 years. They're like his two collaborators. They'd all agreed. So I knew that worst case scenario, even if I didn't get him, I had, it was worth the trip to record these podcasts. So I meet Homer and record with Homer, and I meet Chris and record with Chris. And of course I, do it, but I just pitch it at the end, like, listen, I really want David, like, is there any way? And so Chris was like, yeah, I'll speak to him and I'll let you know. And anyway, the day started to evaporate, before I was meant to fly home. And in the end, I just took a punt and I just emailed him. I had his email address. And so I wrote him, an email just saying, I tried to appeal to his, his sense of humor. And, I said, listen, I would really love to, come and talk to you and finish this project with you. It provoked a phone call back from Chris. He said, David got your email. He loved it. Okay, he'll do it. I was like, yes, but there's some bad news. What's the bad news? He's leaving town tonight. I'm like, okay, well, I can do it now. No, he's going. He doesn't have time. Could we do it on Skype or... And I'm just like, Steve, every single one of those podcasts, with the exception of Stuart from Barry and Stuart, the other 98 that happened at that point had all been done face to face. And that was my dream. I wanted to sit and look him in the eye and ask him about all these things, And so I remember I called Alex, the producer of Champions of Magic, and I said, I can't believe it. It's like, he said he'll do it, but, it'll have to be by Skype. And Alex said to me, just fly back. Just fly back. You'll never regret it. It'll cost you $1,000, whatever it costs you. Just, you got to do it, Rich. Like, this is what you wanted. You wanted to look him in the eye. So I did. So I flew home, and then I booked another flight and I flew back. And so I was like, obviously financially it was a silly decision really, but then thank God this GoFundMe thing came around, which kind of helped.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'll never forget the night itself. It was really exciting. They said we'd do it at the museum, and I remember it was the most nervous I ever was doing one. If you've never seen David's sort of museum from the outside, it's I don't know actually if it's based on this, but it's very much like Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory.
All right.
It's all beautiful, like, but you're looking through the fence kind of thing. And I remember, the gate opening, and I go in, and Chris met me, and we sat down, and I sort of set up. And I remember David called him. He was on his way, just finished the show at the MGM, and he wanted to know about the technical setup that I had, which I thought was quite interesting, because no other person had ever taken interest in that. But all the other 99 podcasts, what microphones he got, what, is there echoes? I could kind of hear what he was saying. And so yes, he came in and we sat down, and there was no small talk. He came in and sat down and was like, okay, let's begin. And so the interview that you can hear is literally from that. It's, there was no small talk at all. So we talked for like 2 and a bit hours. I think the whole thing edited down to about an hour and 50. And, that was it. He shook my hand at the end and left. And so it was amazing. And we put it out. What happened next, I haven't shared this publicly, was really interesting. So I put it out, and I got loads of good feedback. But I was also, what I kind of found out was that a number of people had reached out to him, including Andrew O'Connor, Darren Brown's manager. He loved the interview, invited him to see the Darren show on Broadway. And I could see on Twitter that he was getting lots of tweets from people saying how much they loved our interview. I didn't hear from him again. Anyway, 2 months later, I'm back in America with Champions of Magic, and we're doing a show in Phoenix, Arizona, I think it was. We were somewhere near Vegas. And so it was my birthday. We had a couple of days off. Alex and Strange said, what should we do for your birthday? I said, let's go to Vegas. So we go to Vegas, and I'm like, can we go and see the Copperfield show? And they're like, how many times have you seen it? I'm like, oh, just please, I'd love to see it. It's my birthday. And I said, also, I'd love to see it near the back. I've always booked seats down the front. I'd love to sit near the back and see, the stuff, see what it looks like from far away. So I buy tickets, and we go in and we sit down. And as we sit down, Alex looks around and he goes, I think this is where he reappears at the end. He does the vanish and reappear in the audience thing. I'm like, I think you're right. Anyway, we get towards the end of the show, and sure enough, he's literally stands on our table, basically, or just in front of our table. And so I don't know why, we just decided to give him a standing ovation,
Yeah.
He turned around and he clocked us, and he was, oh, guys, nice to see you, sort of thing. And he goes back, and then literally within 30 seconds, one of his assistants was stood next to us. So David's got a microphone that allows him to talk to his crew throughout the show. He can mute his mic, I think, and talk to his crew. And so he mentioned to them that I was in the room, and said, I'll bring him backstage. So Strange, Alex, and I went backstage afterwards. And this was amazing. He was so, so warm towards us. And he was like, that interview was, the reaction to it was fantastic. I was really, really pleased. And he said something to me. He said, when I listened back to it, he said, I could tell it was very from your heart. And I really appreciated that. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And then it was like, hey, what are you guys doing now? And we're like, no plans.
Nothing.
Cancel the Soleil tickets, guys. And so we're going to the cinema if you'd like to come. We were like, yeah, we'd love that. And so we went to the movies with him and sat next to him and watched a terrible movie together.
What was it?
It was Stuba. It's a movie about an Uber driver. And we sat there, and I was sat next to him the whole time, kind of not relaxed, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, of course.
And I was like, it was great. And they say you should never meet your heroes. You should meet your heroes. Every time I meet him, he's a delight. Every time I talk to him, he's warm and he's interesting. And, obviously he's had an amazing life. So, I'm so pleased I met him. And going to the cinema with him a few months later.
That's funny.
It was just like the icing on the cake, it was just like, this is brilliant. What an ending to this project.
I've got this image of him watching a film and you watching him.
We were stood in the concession stand, the queue outside, and he said, "Oh, what would you like?" And I was like, "I'll have a Diet Coke, please." And he bought me a Diet Coke, and it was like a weird sort of experience.
That's so strange.
Oh, I remember also when we went in, the trailers were playing, and he was sat next to me. And we were talking about the show that we just seen. And this guy in front of us turned around and shushed us, like, shh. And I'm like, blimey, I guess David Copperfield. And David was like, Yeah, I'm sorry. It was just like
Brilliant.
normal life things like that, which I've just, I've only ever watched him my whole life, but I've watched him on stage and on screen. I've never seen him interact in like the real world sort of thing. It was kind of interesting. Also,
I
he's
just,
still insanely famous.
of
Like,
course, yeah,
like people, and it's fascinating. I've been around other famous magicians, and the public recognize them, and they're like, "Oh, it's so and so." When they see him in public, their jaw hits the floor because it's like
yeah,
that's David Copperfield. It's like it's like Ricky Gervais or Morgan Freeman, or it's proper A-list star, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
so when we were in public and walking around, people, their jaws hit the floor that it was him. It's not like, oh, it's that guy, like, the latest contestant from Big Brother or something. It's
Yeah.
like, he's a superstar, isn't he?
And he looks like one, and he feels like. Do you know what I mean? He's got it all. He's got all the stuff going on. Even though he's getting on more now, he still looks like a superstar. He looks like a kind of old school, famous person. You can imagine seeing him in the street and going, "Oh, he looked a bit normal." You can imagine, kind of like you said, the jaw dropping. And I think that's part of his appeal, is that he's still got that kind of that genuine X factor. That thing that
He's just a star. He's just
yeah.
a star. When you meet him, actually Darren Brown was the same when I met Darren. Darren's got a real presence. It's like you just go, you can't learn it. Like, you've got it or you haven't. It's like you can be a good magician. You can learn to be a great magician. You can work really hard and do great work. But there's, these guys that, the Darrens, the Tellers, the Copperfields, they just got an X factor that you can't learn. And so, yeah, he's just a star, and I also with David, it's kind of, I hope this doesn't sound like I'm saying something silly, but, we're just really lucky to have him in magic, like, he could have done anything, I think if he hadn't done magic now, he'd be a movie director or something, like, because of the way his brain works. So, there's certain magicians, I think we can all think of them, actually, there's even people like Mark Kirstein and, Ben Hart and these guys, where you go, actually, we're really lucky to have them in magic, because they could, whatever they decide to turn their hand to, they're going to be a huge success with it. So yeah, I think there's certain magicians, certainly I look at and feel like that and go, we're just lucky to have them. I've had a lifetime of inspiration from David Copperfield. Literally what I do today is because of him. If I saw him when I was 11 years old at the NEC in Birmingham do a show, if I hadn't seen him do that show that night, I probably wouldn't ever have done what I've done. I probably wouldn't be sat here now. It was like, when you've got someone in any industry that does great work, it obviously just inspires future generations, doesn't it? So
I think it's actually it's the most important thing, because without the inspiration, we kind of it's the thing that it's the thing that I use and seek out when I'm feeling a bit unmotivated, when I don't know where I'm going to go, when I don't know what path I'm going to take. It's like that those people are there because they need to be there, because we need role models, and we need, not necessarily how they act, I mean, it might be, but we need, we're talking about the inspiration of writing, or the Seinfeld doing this or that. It's all these little stories we pick up. Your podcast was huge in that for me. It's, it maintained a level. Every time I listened to one of those things, I kind of went, right, I'm back in the game. You know what I mean? And I'll say to people, if they go and watch it, really importantly, the biggest mistake I made for a bit in that, and I do it with other podcasts as well, is I'll kind of skip certain guests and go, well, I don't really know who they are. And when I went back and actually realized that, because I think I heard one actually of someone that I didn't know much about, and really enjoyed it, and went back and I realized there was something in all of them, even in the people that I would think, no, they haven't really got anything for me. It's the stories, and the stories of their development and growth. And like I said, you don't have to agree with all of it, but that's where the inspiration comes from. And just in that story you told me then, I just, one of the things I hope people get from this is, what would have happened if you hadn't written that email? Because many people wouldn't have. Many people would have gone, oh, I'm going to sound so stupid. Who am I to email David Copperfield? And look at what happened. And it reminds me of, it's not nowhere near on the same scale, but when I was way back, I was a magician in Sheffield, struggling. I didn't have much, and I got a gig doing Matt Helders from Arctic Monkeys' birthday party, just like 20 people. And it's funny, it's great. And I went home, and I just kept playing on me. And I was like, I've never had a sort of celebrity testimonial. And even though at Sheffield, everybody knows it, even if I got work in Sheffield. So I managed to get his number off the local events magazine. And and sort of text him. I said, I'm so sorry, tell me to go away, but you seem to really enjoy it. Have you got anything I can put on my site or anything like that? And he said, yeah, as long as you come and teach me some magic tricks. So I went up his house and ended up being asked to go on tour with them.
Wow.
And I'm a 35-year-old, I've kind of done my bit. I've got a kid. My life was fine, but it was sort of plodding along. And it was, that year was brilliant because I had a bit of an inkling into what it was like to hang out with people that were on that level. They were massive at the time, just hitting America. And I so nearly didn't send that text because I felt a bit stupid or was worried about him saying no. And I think that email it breaks my heart what would have happened if you hadn't have sent that email.
Yeah. I think, particularly like people on that level, like you talked about, people in successful bands or, I mean, they understand ambition and drive and, even, not too far away, to be a dream to interview. I mean, David's Broadway show was called Dreams and Nightmares, so he understands all about people's dreams. So I think take a risk. Don't bother anyone, obviously, but reaching out to someone saying, hey, I've always wanted to do this, or could we maybe look at doing this? What's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to say no, and everyone's just going to move on. So push yourself. Nothing. Good things can happen if you do that, I think. Yeah,
absolutely. And so that was obviously such a pinnacle. And then you get home, and I'm not going to take loads more of your time, but I just want to know you kind of wake up in your house next day and go, what's next? What happened? How was that? How was the after?
It was really interesting, actually. I was really lost after the podcast ended. There was nowhere it could go after that. It was, as you said earlier, it was the arc, it was the journey. And so I really missed it, actually, for a while. I was very lucky, obviously, with Champions of Magic to, we were back out on tour again a few months later, and that kind of has helped. But I do miss it. I certainly have seen, over the last few months, there's lots of podcasts that have launched and people doing similar things. So it seems like at the moment there's a bit of noise. There's a bit too many of those kind of things out there. But I've got other ideas for things that I'd like to do next that are, they're not like the Magician's Podcast. There's, I think that format of sitting down and talking to one person, I personally, for me, I feel like I've done that now. So whatever I decide to do next, and I've got some ideas and some people I'm pitching some things to, I want it to feel new and different, like the Magician's Podcast felt when it launched in 2015. Absolutely. You've got to, the goalposts move, right? So you've got to try and hit the goalposts again. So I to answer your question though, I missed it for a long time. It was such a big part of my life. I would sit there editing quite often till 3 a.m, particularly when I was I do 24 episodes, and when I'd be in the middle of the series, it was a relentless job. It was all day, every day, because you're editing this week's episode, you're trying to arrange, the ones in the future, you're doing social media for last week's episode. Like it was, you're researching for other interviews you're going to do. It was relentless.
Yeah.
But it was a good feeling having, as I said, having something to do, right? Like having that thing you're working towards. I mean, what's great about producing content online, I'm never going to be an Instagram magician or anything like that, but I do love the idea. It's still sat there. You can go and listen to it right now, and it will continue to be there. For as long as I'm alive, anyway. In terms of, it's free. There's no cost. It's sat on iTunes. It's on Podbean and Stitcher and all these other things. And there's 100 episodes that anyone can go and listen to. I still, I did that a week ago. I got a message from someone in Australia that's just found them. They're a little gold mine to find, actually, if you've never listened to them, or you weren't around or into magic when I started them in 2014, maybe it passed you by. But they're still sat there, and a lot of it's still relevant, actually. And of course, there was some stuff that I didn't think about when I was making them, which was like the interview with Paul Daniels. I recorded that 6 months before Paul passed away. The day I met him, he was on great form. Rob James was there. We went to his house together, and he was brilliant in the interview, and we hung around for another hour or so afterwards chatting to him, and he was full of stories. And little did I know that day, I believe I recorded the last interview with Paul that he did for the Magic community. And so, you know, I didn't, when he passed away, I remember going, well, this suddenly feels important now, you know, like this is, you know, Paul's possibly the greatest magician this country ever produced. And here's this 2-hour retrospective with him looking back over all of his work. So I think they're important, you know, in terms of the future, for future generations to enjoy. And, you know, I hope people will occasionally, when you're on as and when there's a gig again and people are on a long drive to a gig, I hope they'll put on a Magicians Podcast episode and go back and revisit them, because I listened to one about 2 or 3 months ago. I hadn't listened to them since I stopped making them, and it was like, oh, it sounds totally different now. Now a lot of time's passed by, you know, it's different.
Yeah, but I will, just to reiterate, because I can't stress enough what I got from them, and I think that any magician, I've said to a couple of people, you know, when someone puts on a Magicians Only or something on Facebook, and they'll put any recommendation for magic podcasts, and they'll say Magicians Podcast, like, oh, I haven't seen that, and it's like, you know, it's kind of like you, and it is timeless. I think it's absolutely timeless. I don't think, you know, because sometimes you do see things like, oh, 2014, it really is. It's a treasure, and I don't say that, you know, just to say it. I think it really is, and I think that the inspiration people will get from that are way more than some books they get and spend a lot of money on. They're free, as is this, and I think I love that thing that this will be there. And it's not about the views for me. It's not about the, you know, checking it out the day it comes. It's about knowing that people will find it and get that information, inspiration. And thank you so much. I do want to say, if there's anything else you want to add, by the way, after this, but I do want to say, for those people, I don't want to miss this, changing cards are available for, is it changingcards.com?
It is. Here's a little treat. So please don't put this on your review, Steve, but if you are listening to this right now, if you listen to me waffling with Steve for an hour, how long does that hit? Here's a little treat for you. Please don't put this anywhere on social media, but okay, if you made it this far, there's a little promo code for you. If you go onto the changingcards.com website, and if you put into the coupon page, podcast friend 4, you get 15% off your order.
Is that the number 4? Yeah,
number 4, podcast friend 4, you get 15% off your order. So if you did just listen to me talking nonsense for an hour, there you go. It was worth hanging around to the end. But don't share it with anybody. It's just because you sat there and listened to me talk for an hour. There you go.
Thank you so much. And Young and Strange, when you're touring again, make sure you let me know and I can share, and we'll
hopefully we'll be back out again as soon as possible. I know Alex is keen to get us out there again as soon as we can, as soon as it's safe for everybody, obviously. So
yeah, of course. And I'm going to go and reread your Magic Circular. So if you get the circular, make sure you read the article. Richard, I'm going to say goodbye to you now, but I don't want you to go, so I'm going to pretend to say goodbye to you now, and then we'll have a little chat. Thank you so much. I've genuinely loved it. I hope you can see that. And thank you.
I've loved it too, Steve. Thanks so much. Cool. Really loved it.
Take care.
Nice talking to you.
So thank you very much. Thank you, obviously, to Richard for being so candid and honest. And thank you for watching until the end. Please do use that promo code because you will be happy with the product. It's so well made. It's so good. And I don't usually talk about the product on these interviews, but I think this time it's warranted. And support, you know, an independent creator. Please like, please subscribe. Please check out cardmagiccourse.com and have a great one. Take care. Bye-bye.